Everyone, to this FOREXT Friday, the last of 2021. It's been a really good series of talks we've had over the year, and pleased to say that we've also got one lined up for January, which end of January, which I think will be about the Nomadi project, which is supported by EFI. So we'll get more information out to you about that. But in the meantime, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. The FOREXT network is a network currently of 14 organisations across Europe supporting forest extension, forest extension organisations working mainly with private forest owners. And this is an opportunity which we developed during COVID to keep in contact and to provide an opportunity to spread the network. Anyway, we're very pleased to have Marko Lovrić from European Forestry Institute, who's going to talk to us about the European Forest Strategy. So, Marko, please, I'll pass over to you and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Mark, and I'll start sharing then. Please say when you see something.
Yes, we can see the, not the full slide. That's it.
All right. Well, first, thanks for having me, and I'm going to talk about the new EU forest strategy that sets the course for the forest sector for the next 10 years in EU. And I'm going to start with some general overview and reading through most of its important aspects, but the slides close to the end are more of implications on what does it all mean. So please bear with me. And this presentation is based from the Commission's interpretation, mostly on the Commission's interpretation of what the strategy represents. So at its core, it's the economic, social, and environmental functions of the forest that are covered by it. It covers the multifunctional role of forests throughout the document and the contribution of foresters and forest-based value chains for achieving sustainable climate neutral economy by 2050 outline. And it also promotes that ecosystem services are restored, resilient, and adequately protected in Europe's forests. And now there are a couple of slides that look like this, which are actually the subheadings of the document, and items, the vertical ones are the sub-chapters within it. So the first chapter is supporting the socio-economic functions of forests for thriving rural areas and boosting the forest-based bioeconomy within sustainability boundaries. And this chapter talks about promotion of sustainable bioeconomy, about ensuring that sustainable use of forest-based bioenergy is set. It talks about promotion of non-forest-based products in bioeconomy and for livelihoods, and about development of skills for sustainable forest-based bioeconomy. Within this chapter, I've highlighted some items that perhaps are the most important ones. And these are to develop a 2050 roadmap for reducing whole life cycle carbon emissions in buildings and establish a standard methodology to quantify the climate benefits of wood construction products and other building materials. To include dedicated actions for the production and the use of long-lived wood products in the full respect of biodiversity objectives in the upcoming carbon farming initiative and carbon removal certificates framework. To continue to analyze the impact of the national support schemes on biomass supply and demand, impact on biodiversity and carbon sinks, and possible market distortions, and assess the possibility for further limitations regarding supporting schemes to forest biomass. To elaborate coordinated and integrated regional, national, and subnational programs on the sustainable production of non-forest products, and as a part of CAP, provide new means to share information on good practices on best design and implementation of forest-relevant inventories, and also to promote the use of Natura 2000 logo for non-forest-based products and services. Then at the review, complement and update the taxonomy climate delegate act for forestry and bioenergy where necessary, to promote collaboration between the tourism sector, forest owners, and nature protection services, and standards and norms for ecotourism activities, and to create a new alliance between the professionals of tourism and foresters. To encourage forest and forestry stakeholders to establish a skills partnership under the Pact for Skills and make the use of European Social Fund Plus. To build a toolkit to help member states to establish lifelong programs and advice to foresters and adapt education and training to the challenges and needs of today's forest needs and realities, and develop employment opportunities. And through the Education for Climate Coalition, the Commission will further promote cooperation and connect pupils, students, teachers, and stakeholders on the role of forests, including on the benefits of outdoor learning. The next chapter in the strategy is called Protecting, Restoring, and Enlarging EU's Forests to Combat Climate Change, reverse biodiversity loss, and ensure resilient and multifunctional forest ecosystems. And in it, the subheadings are to protect primary and old-growth forests, to ensure forest restoration and sustainable forest management, re-afforestation of biodiverse forests, and financial incentive for forest owners and managers. In this chapter, the most important elements are these: to propose a legally binding instrument for ecosystem restoration, to develop guidelines on the definition of primary and old-growth forests, to identify the additional indicators as well as thresholds or ranges for sustainable forest management concerning forest ecosystem conditions such as health, biodiversity, and climate objectives, to develop guidelines on biodiversity-friendly afforestation and reforestation, to develop a definition and adopt guidelines for closer to nature forestry practices, as well as voluntary closer to nature forest management certification scheme, to provide guidance and promote knowledge exchange and good practices on climate adaptation and resilience, to plant 3 billion additional trees by 2030, implementation of the pledge, to supplement the revision of the legislation on forest reproductive materials, and to monitor the situation of tree health in the EU. Then, to promote forest-related interventions in the future CAP, to provide advice and technical guidance on development of ecosystem services payment scheme, to promote forest-related remuneration schemes in the action plan, guidance and promote knowledge exchanges on good practices on climate adaptation and resilience, to strive to increase the uptake of rural development funds, to provide new means to share information on good practices to better design and implement forest-relevant inventories, fostering the exchange between experts in member states. Carbon farming initiative and develop a regulatory framework for certifying carbon removal. To carry out a study on behavioral science regarding the uptake of public funds by foresters. To explore how to facilitate the use of national funds for forestry measures and target them for better ecosystem services in the forthcoming revision of the state aid guidelines. And in the context of the long-term vision for rural areas, a network of forest-dominant rural areas and municipalities will be promoted. The next chapter is called Strategic Forest Monitoring, Reporting and Data Collection. And in it, the most important subheadings are improved use of Copernicus product, other remote sensing data and ground-based monitoring, enhancement of the Forest Information System for Europe, a new legislative proposal on EU forest monitoring, reporting and data collection. Here, the actions are to put forward a new legislative proposal on the EU forest observation, reporting and data collection, and to develop or prepare for strategic plans for foresters and of the forest-based sector, and as a part of the Forest Information System for Europe on the basis of improved Copernicus products, to strengthen the existing monitoring of climate effects and other natural and human-induced disturbances on forests, to prepare and publish regular reports and lay summaries on the forests in the EU, and through its joint research center to develop a European Forest Science Partnership. Then there are some cross-cutting enabling elements which are a strong research and innovation agenda, inclusive and coherent EU forest governance framework, and to step up implementation and enforcement of existing EU acquis. Here, the main actions are to develop a planning for future forest research and innovation agenda together with the member states and stakeholders, to support the evidence-based design and implementation of forest restoration strategies with enlargement and engagement of society and in different ecological socio-economic settings, to enhance the cooperation in the EU by proposing a research and innovation partnership on forestry, and for Horizon Europe's civil security for society program to implement complementary actions in support of disaster risk reduction policies. Then to develop a citizens science program for the forest biodiversity, notably engaging citizens and civil society in monitoring forest biodiversity. To merge into a single expert group into member state representatives reflecting all environmental, social and economic objectives of the strategy. To merge into a single group of dialogue with the civil society, forest owners, industry and academia, and to step up implementation and enforcement of existing EU acquis. This was really a lot. And I think this is normal because strategy has to encompass all kinds of actions. And perhaps I have read through the most important items. Some may be relevant to you, some not so much, but I hope that you have heard some of the items that are of interest to you. But actually, what did we go through? We went through the EU strategy of the sector. And this is a non-legally binding document that in general tells us how the sector should develop. The typical policy cycle means that a couple of years after the strategy is made, there's a more concrete action plan that tells also the implementation measures, the deadlines, and who is responsible for what. In the latest policy cycle, such a document doesn't exist. And here you see some dates of the last and previous EU strategies and the action plans. And here you can see that the action plan comes, let's say, a couple of years after the strategy is made. And 2 or 3 years after the plan is made, within the 10-year period, there's a policy evaluation process going on, which then leads to the next cycle or the next strategy. So you have heard a lot, but all of these are non-binding sentences without deadlines, commitments, funds, or responsibilities. To a big extent, it depends on what the action plan, which is still not made, will say. And all of these EU-level non-binding documents then can become a part of EU legally binding acquis, which usually are directives and regulation. And the typical way how these documents are transposed or, let's say, copied to the national level is that the EU strategy then becomes a basis for national forest strategies, or especially if there is an action plan on the EU level, then the strategy in the national level is more concrete as well. And after all of this is made, then it comes to time to make national laws that correspond to this international legislation. So all that you see are, let's say, the policy directions or where the sector is going, but without clear guidance on how it will work. So there are still many unknowns. And that is why it's perhaps even more important, let's say, to read between the lines on what the document says. A good indication of this reading between the lines is the preamble. So what the basis of the file is, or of the strategy. And here it says that it builds on the biodiversity strategy, and the biodiversity strategy builds upon the Green Deal. So if you take the Green Deal and biodiversity strategy as a starting points to make the forest strategy, you can see where it is heading. In the previous strategies, it wasn't like that. So the strategies are based on previous strategy. There was, let's say, 10 years ago, a big political momentum towards bioeconomy. So the previous strategy was more leaning towards that direction. Now the pendulum has swung towards, let's say, nature conservation, and this is reflected in the document itself. So let's see how the more concrete implementation plans will look like, but this is where all of it is heading. And if you just try to internalize everything that was said, the document pulls in different directions, both that bioeconomy or economy is important, and that nature conservation should and planetary boundaries should be adhered to. So the general idea is that forests would require to supply more of everything from the same forest. And more of everything meaning that it leans more towards social and environmental concerns than it was the case before. So this type of, let's say, change or the direction could be seen as a threat or opportunity, depends on how you look at it. So what can be read between the lines that there will be more, let's call, restrictions on how forest management and wood processing is done. But it also perhaps is an opportunity for different actors in the sector. Like it clearly mentions a payment for ecosystem services scheme for forest owners and managers. It also, let's say, strives towards more inclusion of forestry measures in CAP, so subsidies. So there are some good sides and some bad ones. But once again, a strategy is a very general document. It's more up to the actual points in the action plan or implementation plan that will tell you where all of this is heading. And after that, it also has to be said that not everything in the previous action plans of the EU for the sector was implemented. So in this evaluation phase, well, it was a mixed bag. So some of the measures were more implemented than others. So not everything is set, but this general direction where it is going to is what is of primary concern. And of course, as any other policy document, it has provoked reactions from different stakeholders. And here you have a listing of some. So some reactions from the Nordic countries is that, and these are hyperlinks. I will send the presentation to you later so you can read the documents. So the reactions from the North are that it is entrenching on the competences of the member states, and that it goes well, to a big extent limiting what the forest management is and how free the markets of the wood and non-wood forest products are, like impact on clear cuts, promoting thresholds for ecological forest management, not recognizing the Forest Europe process in reporting on what the forestry sector does, and so on. These reactions were summed up in what is called a Vienna Declaration, which is a joint statement of 15 member states plus Norway, which basically summarized that within the design of the strategy, the opinions of the member states and the forest owners were mostly ignored, and that it truly just promotes the environmental concerns or environmental side of sustainability without taking much into regard of what happens with the economy. There are other types of opinions as well from environmental groups, which say that, well, when it comes to strategy, they are happy that forests' role in climate change mitigation is emphasized, like with the tree planting, and they are happy that the Commission wants more centralized monitoring of forests based on remote sensing. And they actually say that it didn't go far enough, that there are many other nature conservation concerns that were not addressed in the strategy, and that it should be more environmental protection oriented than it is now. So that's it. Thank you for your attention. I will stop sharing my screen now and give the floor to Mark to moderate the discussion.
Great. So, oops. Thank you very much, Marko. Have we got any questions? You can either put your hand up or put something in the chat. So, David, Bold.
Mark, hi, and Marko, thank you for that presentation. That was really interesting, very comprehensive overview of what looks like a very complicated process. Thank you. I wondered about the emphasis of pests and disease in that strategy, and wondered if you could say something more about that.
Yeah, I can tell more about forest disturbances and let's say the damages that happen in the forests of Europe. So there were a couple of recent high-level publications which says that the level of disturbances in Europe's forest is increasing, that the harvesting patches are increasing, that the harvesting area is increasing, that the soil damage is increasing, that the biodiversity loss is occurring, and that all of this leads to basically saying that there's something wrong with Europe's forest. We have to find out what. And we have to find out what means that the Commission is going to do it. In practical terms, it means that they want monitoring of forests to be centralized using remote sensing data. They want that their own criteria and indicators for what sustainable forest management is, or they call it ecological boundaries is. They said it's going to be done by a participatory process, but it's quite a lot centralized. So when it comes to disturbances and everything, basically the position of the Commission is not to trust the forest sector much. They want to find out on their own on what the situation is.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Miles.
Thanks, Mark, and hi, thank you, Marko. I was just wondering what you see the role of independent forest certification in all of the developments in the forest strategy. We're seeing sort of increasing interest in certification for other environmental services other than just timber and biomass provision. So do you see that playing a role in the outputs of this strategy?
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks. The presentation mentions that, and the strategy as well. And I actually listened to the presentation about strategy by people who made it. And I've asked the same question about the certification, because we have at least FSC and PFC certification. They also certificate different ecosystem services as well. They said that there are still no concrete plans on how this will look like, but it's going to be an initiative from the Commission for sure. And let's say how it will look like or be similar or different from the existing certification schemes, but obviously they want to develop something of their own. And I think the common trope is like with this monitoring as well. They want to do it something of their own, not what the forest sector provides. So same with criteria, and now same with the certification.
Thank you. Any other questions? Raymond.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, Marko. My question is regarding the next steps. What should member states should take, and in what is it next year, or the deadlines for next steps? I understand that at this moment this new forest strategy is approved by European Commission, and so the competence or responsibility for the next steps is for the member states. Is it so?
Well, each step of the way should include member states and all other stakeholders. In this cycle of strategy formulation, the member states said we were not consulted enough. The different representatives of forest owners and managers said the same. So there was a stakeholder engagement procedure, but I cannot comment to what extent and how that did it actually look like, or its evaluation. This type of information that I don't know of it, and I haven't seen any publications saying how good this was. But I presume so. But it was the process was run by DG Agri, and the next step, the action plan or the implementation plan, however they name it, will again be moderated or facilitated by the Commission. And to what extent are they going to include member states and other stakeholders? This is up to them. I think to a large extent it depends on the reaction of different stakeholders, and the reaction of the many member states and forest owners and managers was strong and clear. We were not consulted or not consulted enough. The next step, we want to be consulted more. So how will these actors put pressure on the Commission to have them, let's say, more included? I cannot tell you that. But for now, the reactions have been strong, both formal and informal ones.
But that means, could we expect some changes in current EU strategy redaction?
No. So once a document is made, it is highly unlikely that it will change. What is likely is that, let's say, different levels of stakeholder influence will be made in the preparation of this action plan or the implementation plan. So more agencies available there, but once the strategy is made, that's it.
Okay.
It is highly unlikely that it's going to change.
Okay, and the deadline for this action plan, maybe you told, but maybe I missed it.
I didn't, and it doesn't exist. So usually, let's say, these more concrete, non-binding documents come up a couple of years after the general one or the strategy. So let's say in 2 or 3 years, maybe maximum 5, you should have some more concrete documents with the deadlines and the responsibilities and funding and everything. But perhaps they have already started with it. I don't have this information, but let's say 3 years is a lot of time for all stakeholders to be involved.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Marko, the general balance of the strategy seems to be probably more in favour of biodiversity to the climate crisis, possibly in terms of carbon specifically. And obviously it's moving to the implementation plan where that might be adjusted. And do you think, is that likely? Because productive forestry seems to be less emphasised, possibly.
Yeah, well, forestry is just a very small segment of the wider EU policy agendas and settings, and it has to correspond with, let's say, what the general policy mood is, or what the overarching directions of the Commission are in a given mandate. So in the previous one, it was more towards bioeconomy because you had the bioeconomy and the updated bioeconomy strategy, and this was like one of the main directions of where the Commission is going to in the next 7 years or so. But now it's the swing went to the nature conservation with the Green Deal. So all of these policies, and it just goes in all the sectors that are related to it. Forestry actors have some say, but not a dominant one. So this kind of interaction between different stakeholders, basically arguing from the same type of agendas, has been existing since Europe. The European Union came to be. So if you look at Natura 2000 or CAP or any other policy, so the same actors were arguing for the same type of arguments, but just sometimes the overall direction was going one way or another. And now the overall direction is going to nature conservation, and although the pushback from the forestry actors will be strong, let's see how much sway will they have in the end. Perhaps some things, more practical ones, will be more in the favor of, let's say, the typical forest actors than they are now, but there is no guarantee for anything.
Great, thank you. So any more questions for Marko? No. I think that's probably it then, Marko. Well, can I just say thank you very much? And it's really interesting from the UK situation to look at our colleagues across the water, and we certainly see a big influence from yourselves. So it'll be interesting to see how the strategy does develop into the implementation plan at some stage. And anyway, we'll look forward to working with whatever happens. But thank you very much indeed. Yeah.
Thank you. And just as a concluding remark, this presentation will be shared with you. I will give it to you and other colleagues. But also bear in mind that what can be perceived as a challenge may also be an opportunity. So there are some segments that perhaps go in favor of private forest owners or extension organizations, like this payment for ecosystem services. So this is something that came up from time to time. There'll be something on this. This certification scheme, it also may go in your favor. On the centralized monitoring system may go as well. So because it also provides more market more opportunities to enter formal markets. So there are many opportunities, but they are more intersectoral than they were before.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you very much indeed. And as Marko said, we'll share the presentation on the FOREXT website. And yes, so thanks a lot and goodbye, everyone. And well, as we're coming towards Christmas, I wish you all a happy Christmas and look forward to FOREXT Friday in end of January. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.